There's Lu Dort in 2019, Aargin Wiggins in 2021, Jaylin Williams in 2022, and Ajay Mitchell in 2024. All of those Thunder players were either undrafted or selected in the second round, but all of whom have been important contributors for OKC's 2025 championship run. And this year, OKC might have once again found another potential diamond in the rough towards the end of the draft after they selected 6'5" wing Otega Oweh with a 41st overall pick. Well, what actually made Oweh a very interesting prospect heading into the draft process was the fact that he became a clear star at the college level, but he actually spent 4 years there before he gained that status. Oweh spent his first 2 years in college just 20 miles south of Oklahoma City playing for the University of Oklahoma, wherein during his freshman year, Oweh was mostly utilized as a defensive stopper while only starting 9 games and averaging less than 5 points per contest. Though in his second season, Oweh was promoted into a starting role wherein he averaged double digits at 11 points per game while flashing improvements in his offensive package. But overall, it was when Oweh transferred to the University of Kentucky when his usage really got a major boost on the way to him breaking out as a real NBA caliber prospect. After playing just 19 minutes per contest in his first 2 college seasons at Oklahoma, Oweh's playing time has been up to 30 minutes per contest in his junior and senior years in Kentucky, all while emerging as the Wildcats' top scoring option during his last 2 college years. Whereas for the 2025 to 2026 season, Oweh averaged a team-high 18.6 points per game. At the same time, Oweh also earned the distinction of being the fastest player in University of Kentucky basketball history to record 1,000 career points, after he totaled 1,255 points in just 72 games over a 2-year span. Well, for sure, you can't really get too riled up with players taken in the second round of the draft because very few of them actually pan out to be high-level contributors at the NBA level. And the same thing applies to Oweh, especially considering there are still quite a number of questions with his game, especially on the offensive side of the floor. But what is it that makes Otega Oweh look like the ultimate steal of this year's draft, and what could we actually expect him to bring to this OKC Thunder team? Obviously, the Lu Dort comparisons stem out from the fact that Otega Oweh's main standout skill is his elite defensive ability, but in addition, Oweh's measurements are also similar to that of Dort. He stands 6'5" with a 6'8" wingspan while having a chiseled 216-pound frame. So basically, just like Dort, Oweh is one of those smaller NBA wing-type players but is actually built like a tank. However, Oweh's main difference with Dort is that he enters the NBA with a more advanced offensive skill set and with more athleticism than Dort had when he entered the league back in 2019. While on the offensive end, everything starts with Oweh's driving game and his ability to put pressure at the rim. Oweh is a special driver whose superpower is his explosive first step and his ability to effortlessly get into his spots. When he drives into the lane, he uses a combination of speed and fluidity with the ball to constantly get paint touches. And with his strong build, Oweh is just capable of attacking defenders on their chest while getting them out of balance, which allows him to bulldoze his way into the interior even without the help of ball screens. Basically, once Oweh gets a head full of steam on his drives, there's rarely anybody who can stop him on his tracks, and when he gets near the basket, his strength and athleticism also allows him to finish through contact. Last season, Oweh converted 67.6% of all his half-court shot attempts at the rim, which ranked in the 80th percentile of Division I basketball, which is such a strong mark for a wing player who's only 6'5". But more than that, I also like the fact that even in those few instances when Oweh doesn't get all the way to the rim, he's still been able to display a fairly reliable touch to be able to score. Whenever he was bumped, his strength allowed him to absorb contact, which enabled him to hoist up some floaters and some shots off the glass against traffic in the paint. And overall, Oweh shot a decent 40.7% on non-rim shot attempts in the paint last season. Well, for sure, we obviously can't expect Oweh to operate as a heavy usage driver for OKC as a rookie, especially in half-court settings. Although it's definitely in the open floor wherein I think his rim attacking ability can be displayed right off the bat. Oweh is capable of being a wrecking ball in transition. He's just really fast and fluid with a ball in his hands on the open floor, where he's adept at making runouts and sprints while being able to easily finish above the rim when he gets a sliver of space. But then he's also capable of using some Euro steps and some deceleration moves before knifing his way through defenders before finishing against contact. Last season, Oweh was elite on the open floor as he produced 1.54 points per possession on transition situations, which ranked in the 95th percentile of Division I basketball. He'll just basically be a great fit with this OKC Thunder team has been the most efficient transition unit in the NBA last season, and at the very least, Oweh gives the Thunder another physical driver who can constantly touch the paint and apply rim pressure off the dribble, which will just provide OKC more redundancy in terms of opening up space for shooters and cutters. But more importantly, Oweh's ability to play through contact on his drives will also enable him to draw fouls consistently, especially in the long term when he's getting more on-ball reps with the Thunder. Last season, he averaged 6 free throw attempts per game for Kentucky, and those free throws just consistently gave him an extra scoring boost, as almost a quarter of Oweh's total point output last season came from the free throw line. And that was such a huge reason why Oweh had only one game as a senior wherein he failed to score double digits. Well, sure, there will be questions as to whether or not Oweh can constantly finish and take advantage of his athleticism against bigger rim protectors in the NBA, especially in the half-court, as finishing at the rim against defensive anchors has been one minimal concern for him in college. To be fair, this rim finishing problem has also been a constant concern for Lu Dort in the NBA, as Dort's only shot 58% at the rim for his entire career as pretty much an undersized wing. But considering Oweh is a superior athlete who's had more rim finishing reps than Dort entering the league, I'm actually confident that Oweh will end up better as an interior scorer who can consistently shoot around the mid to high 60% at the rim right off the bat. Though, despite the ton of on-ball playmaking reps he's had as a first option with Kentucky, in OKC, he will be moving down in the offensive pecking order. Therefore, Oweh will mostly be expected to score off the ball early on. Good thing is, Oweh's a solid cutter who's shown some incredible feel when slipping off his man, who's adept at making timely backdoor cuts to be able to get easy buckets around the basket. But of course, ideally, we'll also get to see Oweh provide value as at least a catch-and-shoot floor spacer for OKC right off the bat. Well, there are a lot of positives when projecting Oweh's trajectory as a three-point shooter at the next level. First, Oweh's consistently increased his three-point shooting volume every year in college from just 0.1 attempts as a freshman to almost 4 attempts per game as a senior, and while the efficiency from deep has constantly fluctuated, Oweh's still been a career 34.7% three-point shooter, which isn't bad. Although the percentage has actually dropped down to just 33.5% last season. Well, looking at it, I think some of the inconsistency could be due to Oweh's shooting mechanics. His shot itself looks fluid, but the problem is, the release has a slight hitch and looks just a tad too slow. The good thing though is that Oweh's length has allowed him to compensate, as he uses that to easily deploy a decent high release, which made his shot less vulnerable against closeouts, which is why Oweh was still able to shoot a solid 38% on catch-and-shoot threes last season despite a low volume of 3 attempts per game. Though the concern right now is that the slow release could give him problems against quicker closeouts at the NBA level. Nonetheless, Oweh's already at a solid strength level, which already gives him a good starting point when working on speeding up his release moving forward. And in addition, you also gotta love that Oweh's not just limited as a standstill shooter, as he's also shown the ability to shoot off slight relocations in the perimeter. Plus, with the Thunder, Oweh will mostly be deployed on the corners, and the positive here is that Oweh took almost 40% of his three-point attempts from the corner last season, and he was able to drain a solid 41.5% of those corner three-point attempts, which ranked in the 71st percentile of Division I basketball. Add to that the fact that Oweh was able to convert some pull-up three-pointers despite the slow release, and there are just enough indicators that he can become a real floor spacing threat for the Thunder on high volume in the long run, provided he makes some minor tweaks to his shot. But more than the scoring, I'm also excited with how Oweh can develop as a playmaker at the next level. Well, sure, he's never been an elite passer, but the playmaking part of Oweh's game is something that's also improved each year he was in college. After displaying negative assist-to-turnover ratios in his first 2 seasons, Oweh has produced a positive assist-to-turnover ratio over the last 2 years in Kentucky, which is where he thrived as a capable secondary playmaker who makes solid connective passes and quick reads even when operating on motion-based offense. But even when he acted as a pick-and-roll creator, Oweh has displayed good vision and the ability to make quick and timely passes to rollers once he's drawn a help off ball screen actions. Well, for sure, right off the bat, Oweh will step into the NBA as arguably the Thunder's most explosive vertical athlete, but it is his potential growth both as a playmaker and as a floor spacer that should really open up more things for OKC offensively in the long run. And it is crazy that we still haven't talked about the best part of Oweh's game, which is his defense. Well, it's almost hard to fully encapsulate how good Oweh is in this end of the floor. His constant motor and physicality is something you would see from Lu Dort, his quick hands and feet are Cason Wallace kind of stuff, and the physicality for his size would easily remind you of Alex Caruso. Combine all of those with his 6'5" frame and almost 6'9" wingspan, and it's easy to see why Oweh's been so good at stopping both quicker guards and bigger wings. First, Oweh is a really strong on-ball defender who simultaneously deploys strength, balance, and active hands to apply pressure on ball handlers. He's got a low defensive stance and quick feet when guarding in space, which makes it hard for scorers to make dribble penetrations or to execute their reads when Oweh's in front of them, which often forces creators to settle for tough jumpers. Oweh's also got solid lateral movement, which is why even when players try to drive past him off the dribble, Oweh would effortlessly glide his feet when tracking his man before funneling them into a bad shot or a block near the basket. But then there's also the physicality component of Oweh's game. There were a lot of times when bigger players tried to move him on the post, but Oweh would hold his ground and force them to give up the ball. Also, Oweh's excellent in maintaining his balance even when players try to back him down inside, enabling him to use his active hands in order to blow up entry passes. More than that, I really love how Oweh will be able to defend ball screen actions at the NBA level right off the bat. Sure, he's not yet as good and as strong as Lu Dort in terms of being a screen navigator, but Oweh is still a solid ball screen defender who's able to effectively guard the ball handler while also offering enough resistance to the screening big man. And even when he gets stuck in a ball screen, he always fights to recover and he always tries to use his length to slide between the ball handler and the screener in order to prevent a play from developing. I can just imagine the type of defensive chaos that OKC could cause on the floor when they deploy a lineup which features Oweh plus two of Cason, Dort, or Caruso, all of whom are extremely great on-ball defenders as well as excellent screen navigators. Well, right off the bat, I'm confident that Oweh would be able to guard positions 1 to 3 and with his strength, even some bigger forwards the NBA level. And having that kind of player just gives the Thunder more options in terms of deploying on-ball stoppers against opposing teams' number 1 or number 2 options, which will be important for OKC, especially at times when 1 or 2 of Dort, Caruso, and Wallace would miss games simultaneously. Though even when they're not deploying him on the ball, the Thunder can still expect Oweh to contribute as a defensive playmaker who gets steals and deflections and who can just blow up opponents' actions. Oweh has got great off-ball instincts and great timing, which when combined with his high motor and great hands allows him to constantly make aggressive plays off passing lanes. Oweh just knows when the best time is to jump into the ball to generate a steal, and I also love how a lot of his steals come from plays when he would suddenly shrink the floor as a help defender, which also shows how Oweh himself just constantly engineers opportunities to end possessions in the perimeter. In addition, Oweh also does a solid job of recovering and making contests and shooters. He covers a lot of ground in his closeouts, and he leverages his length and his vertical pop to disrupt a player's shooting motion or to completely get a block off a jumper. Well, last season, Oweh averaged a career-high 1.8 steals per game as well as 0.3 blocks per contest, and that was despite him being his team's leading scorer while also experiencing the highest usage rate ever in his college career. So just imagine how much more energy Oweh can provide on the defensive end for the Thunder when he's not taking 14 shots a game the way he did in Kentucky last season, especially when considering OKC's already got a plethora of more experienced stoppers on the roster who they would rather deploy on the ball more than Oweh. Well, sure, we still don't know how good Oweh could become with the Thunder or if he's even going to be productive at the NBA level in the first place, because that's just how it's been historically with players drafted in the second round. But at the very least, with Otega Oweh, we know that the Thunder have landed an athletic wing who projects as a high-energy connector on both ends of the floor, and basically a type of guy who can defend the opposing team's best perimeter option while also being able to fill the gaps offensively without needing the ball in his hands. Having that type of projection alone already makes Oweh an outright steal for someone who was selected 41st overall in the draft, but considering how Oweh's improved and competed at every stage of his college career with every opportunity given to him, I believe that those projections speaks more of his floor than his ceiling at the NBA level. Thank you guys if you've actually made it this far into the video, but how do you actually project Otega Oweh's ceiling at the NBA level? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.